Hello and welcome back to Skepticus. I'm your boy, Adam of NOLA, and today I'm going to do something that I thought would be a little fun. I was poking around the interwebs looking at Christian apologetics when I came across this article. And the article is 65 apologetics questions every Christian parent needs to learn to answer. This article starts off by saying in a prior post, he has talked about why parents have to care about apologetics. And then he puts in parentheses, the reasoned defense of Christianity. Ladies and gentlemen, apologetics has nothing to do with the reasoned defense of Christianity. Apologetics is not just defending Christianity. It's picking a dogmatic position and working backwards from it, finding any evidence that you need in order to back up your position, ignoring any evidence that does not back up your position, and sticking in an unreasoned fashion to whatever your holy book tells you to do. Now, to be clear, I don't have a problem with the idea that somebody would, quote unquote, defend their faith. If there's some Muslim next to you and he says your religion's stupid and you feel like engaging with him and you say, no, it's not. I mean, fine. It's probably not very productive. But if you feel the need to defend your faith, defend it. But I will tell you this, unfortunately, too many times, apologetics has nothing to do with simply defending your faith. It has everything to do with coming up with any excuse that you can find to justify what has already been hammered into your head by your religious leaders, by your church, and by your holy text. That's why apologetics has nothing to do with being a reasoned defense of Christianity. So then the writer of the article says, we need to know the specific questions we most need to study and discuss with our kids. The ones that non-believers most frequently challenge Christians on, and the ones that most frequently turn young adults away from their faith after spending 18 years in church. I will tell you, having looked through the list of questions, if any of these can actually turn someone away from your church, then your faith sucks. It's that simple. If I were going to have a God, it would be a God that could be questioned without having to come up with answers that are manufactured to presuppose a certain position. But nevertheless, let's get into these. Number one, what key arguments are there for and against God's existence? I'm not going to sit here and list them all for you. I mean, I'd have to do a little Google search and make a little prep or whatever. I will tell you that you can list the arguments all day. Most of the arguments, like the teleological argument, for example, that are given, it's not like they're proofs for God. A lot of times they are presented as being proofs for God, and yet they are nothing of the sort. Aquinas had his famous 5 ways, which were all proposed to be proofs for God. And yet, again, they fall far short of being any proof for God. And this is going to come up time and time and again as we go through this list. But this list makes a common oversight that I see from so many Christian apologetics, because they constantly put in God where they are thinking Christian God. So take something like the teleological argument. Even if you believe that's a good argument, and it's not, but let's just say you wanted to say, aha, see, that's why God exists. Checkmate. Okay, fine. That does nothing to prove the Christian God. Even if we accepted the teleological argument, you could absolutely make the same argument in favor of Allah or Krishna or Buddha or any other entity that you wanted to come up with. So many of these arguments that they talk about aren't even arguments for Christianity, but so many times Christians assume that if they could make a good case for God, that it would somehow be a case for the Christian God. And yet they never bother to tell you why the Christian God is the God. Of course, the key arguments against God's existence are very simple. There's not a damn shred of evidence anywhere. And no, the fact that babies are born and the fact that trees are so pretty is not evidence. If you think that's evidence, it's because you don't really have an understanding of what evidence actually is. Number 2, what are the practical implications of an atheistic worldview? There is no such thing as an atheistic worldview. There are certain ideas that you could probably say are more likely to be shared amongst atheists, but the only thing that atheists believe is that there isn't a God. So the idea that there is an atheist worldview is a common and ridiculous trope. It's a straw man, which is trotted out by Christians time and time again, because if they can peg you to a worldview, then they can start trying to attack that worldview. But amongst atheists, there are many different worldviews. Atheism itself infers no worldview whatsoever. So the idea that you would even ask, what are the practical implications of an atheistic worldview, exposes the fact that you don't understand the question. Number 3, why would a good God allow evil to exist? Well, hey, Johnny, this depends. Do you believe in free will? Because if you believe in free will, then the answer is done. That's why God allows evil to exist. The problem is that the Bible is very explicit in God saying that he purposely made evil, allows evil to exist, and in some cases even commits evil acts. But the easiest answer to this, if Christians did not feel like they had to defend every damn letter of the Bible, is that, hey, there's free will, and therefore that is why evil exists. Although that doesn't cover everything that we might consider to be evil. There is evil by volition, meaning an evil that I do against my neighbor, or that a government does against me, or, mankind does to mankind. That part is certainly covered by free will if you were to get off some of your other verses in the Bible that directly contradict free will. Of course, there's broader things that happen in our environment that I would say are naturalistic, but some people would say they're evil. For example, why do we have to have a world in which hurricanes destroy people? I mean, supposedly, according to Christian doctrine, God could stop hurricanes and yet does not. And if you really want to be sick about it, you might even say that God does these things for his own purposes, like it's building your character, or it's testing you, or that his committing evil acts against us is somehow part of his plan, which gets really, really sticky. But let's not go into that. Number 4, why would a good God allow suffering to exist? Again, this is kind of a repeat of the free will issue from question number 3. I'm going to skip that. Number 5, why would God command the death of so many people in the Bible? For example, the Canaanites, because God only cares about the Hebrews, i.e. the Israelites. This is made clear time and time again. And even with regard to the Israelites, he's happy to kill them off at will anytime they do anything that pisses him off in the slightest bit. In fact, he will even aid foreign countries to attack them and defeat them if he feels like it's going to teach them a lesson. But the biggest reason that he would allow the deaths of so many people like the Canaanites is because he literally couldn't care less about the Canaanites. All he cares about are the Hebrews. And if you don't believe that, go read the Old Testament. Don't just cherry pick it. Read it, and you'll see he couldn't care less. He couldn't care less about the people that he was plaguing in Egypt, because you know what? They were not Israelites. He couldn't care less about the people that he was ordering them to slaughter, like the Canaanites, because they were not Israelites. Number 6, how can a loving God send people to hell? He can't. There is no justice in hell. If you wanted to tell me that hell was somehow proportional to what evil you had done on this earth, and that it ultimately had a limit, in which case you could either be maybe released into heaven or blinked out of existence. I mean, I still wouldn't think that that's a real thing, but at least it would make some sense as to how a loving God could do that. But literally, in the Christian mindset, if I simply do not believe the right things, I can burn in hell for eternity. There is no logical way that you can tell me a loving God would do that. It makes no sense. Number 7, why does God remain so hidden? Well, there's a really good answer for that. Think about it really carefully. Why would God be so hidden? I don't know, Johnny. You'll have to think deeply on that one. Number 8, why does the Old Testament God seem different than the New Testament God? First of all, no, he doesn't seem different. Really, the bigger issue is that in the New Testament, we don't hear from God anymore. You hear from Jebus. And Jebus is, at least on the surface, happier, lovelier, peacier, more of kind of a hippie-ish type, although if you read carefully, this isn't always true. But even Jebus said that every law of the Old Testament stands down to the letter. So the idea that there is an Old Testament God or a New Testament God is a modern convention that's used to brush away all of the atrocities and the nastiness that one finds in the Old Testament. Number 9, why would God need people to worship him? Isn't that egotistical and arrogant? Yes, it is, Johnny. Good job. That's the only logical answer to this. The idea that the all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, most powerful being in the universe who supposedly created the whole universe needs these tiny little ant people to worship him is one of the most ridiculous aspects of the Christian worldview. And it also is proof that the Christian God is a small, petty God. And if you don't believe me on that, just look at God himself, who said his name is jealous. That's not me making up. That is your scripture saying that his name is jealous. He's a petty little God. Number 10, what is the difference between absolute and relative truth? Now, I do think it's funny because they're going to have a couple things here about truth. And usually this is presented more as a question about morality. Is there objective morality or relative morality? And they're saying truth. And I don't think they mean it the way that it reads, because of course there is absolute truth. Absolute truth are those things which can be verified, tested. In other words, it's what science gets to, Johnny. Yeah, science gets us to absolute truth. Now, it may take iterations. It may take peer review. It may take us revising our theories until we can actually hone them into being true laws of nature. But the fact is that how you get to absolute truth is through science. There is no relative truth. Something is either true or it's not, although our understanding of it at the time may feel relative because we don't understand all of the factors that come into play. Number 11, how can it be reasonable for Christians to claim knowledge of an objective truth? It's very reasonable because there are a lot of Christians, despite me hacking away on a channel like this and griping about apologists, there are many Christians who don't have their head way up their Christian backside and actually understand that science is real. And they understand that the earth is not 6,000 years old. They understand that things like gravity and other laws of nature are real and can be tested, and they are objective truth. But if you say relative truth, this is like the same idea of having alternative facts. It doesn't make any sense. Number 12, what is the role and danger of using common sense in evaluating truth claims? Well, the role or the danger of it is that you may be ostracized by your dogmatic sycophants in your church who don't want you using common sense. And they will throw tons of scripture at you that tell you not to use common sense, because the only thing that they want you to use is whatever was told to you by the book or by your religious leaders. Because if you start using common sense, then you will be a danger to them. Number 13, isn't hell an unreasonable punishment for not believing in a specific set of truth claims? Of course it is. But the bigger issue that they're not even bringing up here in this question is, how can you expect someone to believe something that they don't naturally believe? In other words, here's why hell is a completely unreasonable punishment, aside from the fact that it's eternal and completely unbalanced. But aside from that, you can't just make yourself believe something. You either believe the magic sky daddy or you don't. And if you don't believe the magic sky daddy, there's no amount of you throwing these truth claims at me. And as it says, they're claims. There is no number of claims that you can throw at me that are actually going to make me believe. It's not even within my ability to make myself believe. I can tell you I believe to try to check off some spiritual checkbox, but at the end of the day, that's not belief. That's just me playing a role to try to satisfy my Christian friends. Number 14, how can Christians think their personal religious experiences with God are any more true than those of adherence to other belief systems? They can't. That's really simple. They can't. If you want to tell me that your personal religious experience with God is totally true, and you want to tell me that Sitna, who lives in New Delhi, his experiences, or in Delhi, his experiences are false because they were with Krishna. You are advertising your gross ethnocentricity. And you're also advertising the fact that you have a completely closed mind and all you think is true are those things that your mommy and daddy told you to be true. And you are closed-minded and bigoted towards the beliefs and experiences of others. Number 15, do all religions ultimately point to the same God? Why or why not? Even as an atheist, I would be the first one to tell you that all religions do not point to the same God. I mean, I personally think that they are all fake, but even fake things can be distinct. Like Zeus and Athena are two fake characters in a Greek pantheon, but that does not mean that they are the same. They are two different concepts, two different characters. Now, there are aspects of many religions, like the major religions that are Abrahamic traditions, like Judaism, Christianity, and yes, Islam, that all do stem from the same God, whether you guys want to admit it or not. But there are other religions, of course, that definitely have vastly different ideas of God. And even within the Abrahamic traditions, sometimes their ideas of God are so different that they will fight endlessly about, no, we don't worship the same God. Because you know what? Religion loves some fighting. Yeah, that's the first thing you got to do if you're religious, is fight with everyone else. Number 16, what are the key similarities and differences between the world's major religions? For example, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. I could talk about this for a while. I'm not an expert on these things, but I mean, I could definitely come up with a lot of reasons. I think that would be pretty boring as to trying to list all the differences. Number 17, is Christianity a less intelligent worldview than atheism? Why or why not? You may be surprised to hear me say this, but no, Christianity is not a less intelligent worldview. Christianity is a more bigoted and closed-minded worldview than atheism. But I always want to be very careful when I talk about apologists or Christians in general, because there are a lot of Christians, especially the more advanced apologists, if you want to call it that have learned to hone their arguments very well. And some of them are highly intelligent. You can think very stupid things and be a very smart person. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but there are a lot of highly intelligent people in this world who, unfortunately, over time have learned to adopt and even cling to very ignorant ideas. So while I don't think that you're ignorant because you're Christian, I will tell you that a lot of the dogma which is fed to people as part of Christianity is blatant ignorance. And people who feel compelled to defend this, as apologists do, will twist themselves in the most painful and exquisite rhetorical knots, finding any way that they can to justify their worldview. But does that mean that they are less intelligent than atheists? No, absolutely not. Again, there are some incredibly intelligent Christians out there. There are some incredibly intelligent atheists out there. There are also very stupid Christians and, yes, very stupid atheists. One does not infer the other. Number 18, what extra biblical evidence is there that Jesus existed as a historical person? There are accounts they famously point to from Josephus and I'm forgetting the second one off the top of my head. They have been referenced. He has been referenced in historical documents. The evidence for his historical existence is weaker than most Christians would have you believe. But that being said, I'm not telling you that he wasn't a historical person or that he didn't walk the earth at some point. I'm just saying that it's not as open and shut as a lot of Christians would have you believe. Nevertheless, there are a handful of references. There aren't many. There are a handful of references to Jesus from outside of Christian doctrine. Now, there are, of course, after his death, many, many, many more references to this burgeoning movement of Christianity, but that's very different than specific references exactly to Jesus. 19, what major Old Testament prophecies did Jesus fulfill? Not many. So the biggest ones that you could make an argument for are from Isaiah and the suffering servant. This is all in the eye of the beholder. Despite what Christians will tell you, they will point to hundreds or even thousands of Old Testament prophecies that he fulfilled. There is not one that is an open and shut prophecy fulfillment. Like I said, the closest and most logical fits, if you will, are from those of the suffering servant from Isaiah. But even that is very much in the eye of the beholder. When you look at the rest of the prophecies that Jesus supposedly fulfilled, most of them aren't even prophecies. They are people trying to draw connections. I mean, I have seen this as weak as Jonah was in the whale for 3 days. Jesus was dead supposedly for 3 days and resurrected, and therefore that's the fulfillment of a prophecy. And yet there is no prophecy in Jonah. The idea that there's a prophecy there at all, and the idea that he was in the whale for 3 days and that somehow is a prophecy fulfilled by Jesus, is truly wish fulfillment on the part of Christians. And almost every other prophecy that Christians point to that Jesus supposedly fulfilled is complete bupkis. Also, there are a handful of prophecies that sure, he fulfilled because they were easy to fulfill and he knew about them, like riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. He knew about this. It was easy for him to fulfill it. He knew that this would be one more sign that he was the Messiah. So to say that he fulfilled it, I mean, I guess so, but it's no different than if you told me that in the second coming, this person will walk down my street in a red shirt. And guess what? I could walk down my street in a red shirt and say that I fulfilled a prophecy. Who cares? Number 20, was Jesus wrong about the timing of his second coming? Why or why not? He was absolutely wrong. He said very, very clearly that people who were listening would not pass before his second coming, and they're all dead now. Christians, again, will tie themselves into the most exquisite rhetorical knots trying to tell you why this isn't the case. But just go read the words. It is so clear and it's so simple, and it failed. Number 21, what are the key passages in the Bible that show Jesus claimed to be God? I don't have those off the top of my head, so I'm not going to sit here and try to look them up. Number 22, what does the Bible say about the exclusivity of Jesus with regard to salvation? The Bible says that no one comes to the Father but through me. That's truly 101 right there. Number 23, why did Jesus have to die on the cross for our sins to be forgiven? Couldn't God have just pardoned sins without a gruesome death involved? Yeah, he could have. There is no logical reason why this had to happen. And if you believe that there is a logical reason why this had to happen, that means that your God is not omnipotent. You can't have it both ways. The idea that this had to happen this way, and yet you want to tell me that he's an omnipotent God, they do not mesh. It makes no sense. Number 24, what are the 4 minimal facts of the resurrection that are so strongly attested historically that they are granted by nearly every scholar who studies the subject, even the rather skeptical ones? I don't have them off the top of my head, but they're bullshit. So I'm not, I'm trying to go through these quickly because I don't want this to be a 3-hour video. So 25, what are the main theories, non-belief? But I will mention there's just so much about the resurrection that apologists will do a gish gallop on, and they will try to tell you, oh, this is virtually understood by everyone as true, and this is accepted by everyone, and this is accepted by everyone. And they'll just throw this stuff at you with no proof whatsoever. And the fact is, it's not accepted by everyone. I mean, it's accepted by everyone who's an apologist already. It's accepted by everyone who's on their knees on Sunday, begging for forgiveness, but it's not accepted by everyone or even most people who are looking at it critically. They will throw this crap at you like, no, everyone agrees on this. And they can throw this at you because they know that you won't have the time or the resources to actually look that shit up. 25, what are the main theories non-believers have about the resurrection? For example, unknown tomb, wrong tomb, disciples stole the body, authorities hid the body, etc. I mean, you pretty much hit on it. I mean, regardless of what the theories are, the fact is that you can't prove that he was resurrected. I can't prove that he was not. No one can prove it or disprove it. The sooner you get off of this idea that you have to be able to prove the resurrection, A, you'll be a better Christian. B, you'll understand the true meaning of faith. And C, you'll stop making yourself look like an idiot in front of anyone who actually understands scientific evidence. 26, why do Christians believe a supernatural or bodily resurrection explains the minimal facts better than all the other theories? Well, they do today because it's been browbeat into them. There were centuries where people like the Gnostics debated this heavily as to whether or not the resurrection was truly bodily. And now they believe it. The Christians believe it because it's been codified at the Council of Nicaea, because it's been browbeaten into them. They've been told that they're not Christians unless they go along. And guess what? Since all their family and everyone else around them is a Christian, they don't want to be ostracized. So now they tell you that they believe it too. It's that simple. Number 27, why does it matter whether or not Jesus was resurrected and that the resurrection wasn't simply a metaphor? It matters because your faith sucks, because you feel like you have to prove things in order to somehow make your faith real, when in fact, what should be really important to you is the ideas of this. And whether they happened or not, it shouldn't make a difference in the doctrines of your faith. But for so many Christians, their faith sucks so bad that they have to cling to these ideas of proving the resurrection to try to justify their own mental state. Number 28, who selected what books are in the Bible? That's a long answer. I don't know why they would put this here. I mean, when we talk about the Old Testament, this was curated over many centuries by Hebrews, and there's not like one person who decided what books were in that. In terms of the New Testament, it was infamously misidentified as being codified at the Council of Nicaea, when, and in fact, it was not. The canon was pretty much set. I don't know. It's like 100 years before then. Even there were other apocryphal books that people have debated, but like I said, I'd have to do a whole piece on it to actually say, how each one of the books got in. That's a sticky. It's kind of weird that they would throw this in here because pretty hard to talk about succinctly. 29, how were the books of the Bible selected? Same answer as far as, who selected them and how were they selected. I think the most important thing to know is that it was not the Council of Nicaea, despite what some people may want to tell you. Number 30, why were some books that we know about today? I like how they put books in quotation marks as though, even if the book is full of complete bullshit, it's still a book, okay? But it says, why were some books we know about today, for example, the Gospel of Thomas, left out of the Bible? Again, this is the Apocrypha. These are other books that were purported to have been part of the canon, and yet they were never truly part of the canon. Usually the ones that were left out, they have origins that are even less certain than the other books of the Bible, especially the New Testament. Of course, some of them have teachings that are considered to be heretical, but more often than not, the ones that aren't in are especially not in because their lineage seems to come from much later. And, they kind of cropped up well after the real canon was kind of codified and understood. And then there's a lot of questions as to where they came from, what the agenda was of the writers, etc. I'm not saying that those other books are less or more true. I mean, to me, I'm an atheist, so none of it matters. But I do know that the idea that there were conspiracies to leave these books out is BS. That's a unnecessarily skeptical view that's not supported in fact. 31, how can we know that the Bible we have today is a reliable record of the original writings? That's a good question. And to be fair, there are a lot of atheists who will lazily tell you that one of the problems with the Bible is that it's like a telephone game. It's like, okay, from the Hebrew, it got translated once, and then that translation got retranslated, and that translation got retranslated again. And after you do this 10 times, you end up with a book that has nothing in common with the original book. And that is unfair, and it's ignorant of how biblical scholarship actually works. So whenever they do a new version of the Bible, I mean, there are some versions that are very bad and poorly done, but for the most part, if someone's doing a real version translation of the Bible and they're doing it in good faith, what they will be doing is taking a look at the latest status of biblical scholarship as it applies today. They will be looking at anything that, people have, if they've come up with new original texts, they won't retranslate something that's already been translated 3 times. A good biblical translation will start by going back to the original text again. Now, that doesn't mean that these translations won't change over time because we get new understanding of those original texts. Sometimes we do get new pieces of the original text that are from later, although that's usually like little fragments. Like no one's coming up with like a brand new version of Exodus that hasn't been seen before. That's 100 years before the old one. I mean, that would be an amazing find, but that really doesn't happen. But the biblical scholars, and I'm not one, but I have tremendous respect for them, they spend a lot of time And most of them have a lot of integrity in terms of trying to be very careful about what the original texts say and any new understanding that we have about the text. And then any new translations that go forward ideally encompass that knowledge into the new translation. Number 32, what major contradictions exist in the Bible? And again, they put contradictions in quotation marks. Yeah, right. And what are the explanations? I love how it says, and what are the explanations? There are too many. I mean, this would be a 5-hour video for me to sit here and go through all the contradictions. Some of them are major, some of them are minor. Some of them can be reasonably explained away by apologists. A lot of them are only explained away by people who are clearly doing anything that they can to claim that there are no contradictions at all. If you just sit down without your God-splaining glasses on and you read the book, the contradictions will jump out at you. And again, some of those contradictions may have some explanations, but many of them do not. And anyone who tells you otherwise is just working backwards from this sycophantic view of univocality. 33, does the Bible support slavery? Why or why not? And then it says in parentheses, don't laugh at this in the next two questions. These come up constantly in discussion with atheists. Of course they do, because the Bible absolutely supports slavery. It doesn't just chronicle something as having happened. It endorses it. God gives rules for how to treat your slaves, how to buy your slaves. And yes, that includes how to beat your slaves. And never once says this is bad or don't do it or this needs to go away. And yet biblical or Christian apologists will work so hard to try to tell you that's not the case when the plain text is absolutely against it. Number 34, does the Bible support rape? Why or why not? It doesn't support rape in the idea that, hey, go out and rape people, but it absolutely supports patriarchal domination and a really horrible, crappy treatment of women who have been sexually abused. So while it can't be said to support rape, because to me, support rape is like a passage that says, here's how you rape your women or something, which it does for slavery. But to say that it doesn't tacitly have many problematic passages with regard to rape would be to stick your head way up your Christian backside. Number 35, does the Bible support human sacrifice? Why or why not? It absolutely does. Why? Because Yahweh sucks. It does not support this massive implementation of human sacrifice, but there are absolutely cases. So God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son, and no, it doesn't happen. The angel stops it, but that was absolutely commanded by God and stopped at the last second. I'm going to screw up this name. Jephthah sacrificed his daughter to please God, and God was totally good with it. And that was absolutely supported by God. God specifically calls for the sacrifice of firstborn males in Exodus. Now, to be fair, he does afterwards, shortly afterwards, a few chapters later, say that you can avert this by redeeming them, which is basically paying so that you don't have to kill the child. But if you are reading the verses in Exodus and you don't understand what's going on here as this process of human sacrifice, it's because you don't want to and you're an apologist. I'm not saying there was any evidence that this was a widespread practice amongst ancient Israelites. Number 36, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? This is pretty nuanced, despite what the apologists would like you to believe. But in general, it does speak against homosexuality. Again, I'm not going to get all into the detail here, but there is a lot of nuance to this that Christians don't want to hear about, but it's the simple fact that there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm not going to go into it here. 37, how do Christians determine what parts of the Bible are prescriptive and which are descriptive? Well, I don't know about how Christians determine it, but prescriptive and descriptive are basic terms that you don't need to be a rocket science to understand. When God gives a command to do something, that is prescriptive, or when God does it directly, that is prescriptive. Like when God commits genocide in the flood, that is prescriptive. When he tells the Israelites to commit genocide against the Canaanites, that is prescriptive. In other cases, there are descriptive instances of all sorts of weird stuff happening in the Bible. But this is a common dodge from apologists all the time. They say, oh, that's prescriptive, or excuse me, they will say, oh, that's descriptive, not prescriptive. But even when it's descriptive, When it's descriptive and then there is no more explanation and there's no more context from anyone saying, yeah, this happened, but it was pretty bad, or it's pretty gross, or it shouldn't happen again, or you should never do this. This idea that things are purely descriptive and we are to take no moral lessons from it is a disgusting dodge. So even when it is only descriptive, if there is no other context that says this is bad or don't do this, then you have to remember that this is put in the Bible and no one here is saying is bad. And so many other people are pulling their lessons from the Bible that if you have disgusting practices, even if they are descriptive in nature, and you can't be bothered to put any commentary about how that's bad, that speaks very poorly of your religion and your text. Oh, goody. Young Earth creationism. 38. What is young Earth creationism? It is a fairy tale that is supported by no scientific evidence whatsoever. 39. What are the key pieces of scriptural support for the young Earth creation interpretation of creation in 6 24-hour days? It's called Genesis. You have your fairy tale, you have your creation myth. So that is your support for this fairy tale. Number 40, how do young Earth creationists determine that the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old? By adding up the lineages going back from Adam. 41, what areas of science have implications for the age of the Earth? I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Geology, radiology, but I mean, there's numerous ways that we have now of inferring the age of the Earth. And if I sat here and tried to list the different disciplines that can all bring evidence that speak to the age of the Earth, I would do it a sad disservice. 42, what are the major methods scientists use to estimate the age of the Earth? And what is their consensus on the estimate? What was I'd have to look it up. It's several billion years old is the current consensus on the estimate. Again, in terms of the major methods, I know that geology is part of it, radiology, et cetera. But I mean, there are so many different methods alone that speak to that. 43, what is the relationship between belief in a global flood and the age of the Earth? If you believe that a global flood happened, it means that you don't care about science and you've disconnected your brain from reality. So you probably also think that the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old because you don't care about objective truth. 44, what is old Earth creationism? To be honest, I think I used to be more of an old Earth creationist when I still identified as Christian. So obviously the answer, well, I think you guys know, but the answer is essentially people saying that we're not going to stick our head right up our Christian backside. We're going to admit that the Earth is a whole lot older than 10,000 years. And then they try to make sense of how that fits into the Bible, essentially treating Genesis as like allegory. 45, what are the major reasons that old Earth creationists reject the young Earth creation interpretation of creation? Because young Earth creationism is intellectually ignorant and bankrupt. 46, what are the key pieces of scriptural support for the old Earth creationism interpretation? I mean, I think it would be Genesis, but you could draw other inferences, I guess. But the question is, are you going to say, for example, that the 6 days God made the earth and were literal 24-hour periods, or are we speaking more poetically about these phases, these epochs, these eras that happened? Does it have to be a literal translation? That just depends on how you choose to interpret that text. 47, what is intelligent design? It is the ignorant idea that everything had to have some magical sky daddy to make it. 48, why do intelligent design proponents consider it a scientific theory and not a religious one? Because they don't understand how science works. And they have no integrity when it comes to actually comparing scientific standards to their own made-up theories. 49, what are the major reasons intelligent design proponents reject evolution as a sufficient explanation for the existence of life? Because intelligent design proponents have no intellectual honesty whatsoever. So once you have disconnected your brain from reality and you are willing to take everything in your magic book, hook, line, and sinker, then you no longer need to worry about things like evolution as a sufficient explanation for the existence of life because your magic sky daddy told you something else. Number 50, what does it mean that the universe appears to be finely tuned? This is the ignorant idea that because certain variables in the laws of nature wouldn't work if they were off by a billionth, that means that someone must have finely tuned the universe. This is a profound misunderstanding of how natural systems evolve and emerge. Number 51, what is evolution from a purely scientific perspective? It is the natural selection of traits that lead to speciation. 52, what are the key pieces of evidence for evolution? A stunningly massive fossil record that shows multiple incremental steps and shows a clear tree or hierarchy leading from us and all life on Earth back to much simpler life forms. 53, what are the key questions evolution has not answered? I mean, there have to be millions of questions that evolution has not answered, because unlike your bankrupt theories like intelligent design, evolution is proposed and tested by scientists who never claim that they have answered every question by plugging God into the gaps. So the number of questions that are not answered by evolution could fill a library, because scientists, in their honest pursuit of new knowledge, inevitably come up with an endless stream of new questions and new mysteries to be solved. 54, what do people mean when they talk about macroevolution versus microevolution? I'm not sure how some people would use those terms. I know how I would use them, but it's a weird question to say, what do people mean? It's like, which people? So I'm just going to skip that one. 55, why do evolutionists reject the theory of intelligent design? Because the theory of intelligent design has literally no basis in fact or observable data, and is put together by a series of sycophants and dogmatic idiots who just want to back up their own claims so that they can hold tight to their fantasy of a magic sky daddy. 56, what are the theological implications for an acceptance of evolution? It's not about what are the theological implications? I mean, if your faith didn't suck, they would have no implications, because the idea that your faith is based on whether or not evolution happened means that your faith sucks ass. I mean, seriously, if your faith is so weak that it can't hold up to scientific exploration, then you have no faith whatsoever. 57, what are the theological implications specifically for Adam and Eve not being literal historical people? Same answer as the last one. 58, why would Jesus-loving, Bible-believing Christians differ on their view of origins? That's a good question. I mean, ultimately, because despite what Christians want to tell you, the Word of God and the Bible is not clear. And it is full of interpretations, either that the writers brought to it or that you have to bring to it when you read. And on top of that, as if the book itself weren't problematic enough, then of course you have humans trying to add all their different interpretations and politics over the top of it. So that is why they would differ on their view of origins. Number 59, how can Christians believe miracles are possible given what we know about science? For example, the miracle of Jesus' resurrection. Well, you either believe in miracles or you don't. And despite what you may think, since I'm an atheist, I don't have a problem with you believing in miracles. I don't have a problem with you believing in something like the resurrection. That's fine. There are scientists who believe in miracles, but the key is that they don't then go into their scientific colleagues and say, no, this is a real thing and you can't question me on it because, damn it, it's a miracle and I know that it happened. You can be intelligent and intellectually honest with yourself and believe in miracles, but also know that this is an article of faith. And I am being ridiculous if I expect you to accept my claims that cannot be proven and will never be proven. And if you think that your faith depends upon proving these miracles, then your faith sucks. 60, what does it mean biblically to have faith? And how is that different than the popular definition of faith? Well, I don't know what the popular definition of faith would be, however they want to define that. Biblically, to have faith means to believe with no evidence. It means to essentially check your brain at the door. Again, that doesn't, I know it sounds flippant. It doesn't mean you're stupid if you have faith, but it means that with regard to the things that you have faith in, it is an article of faith. You just either have to believe it or you don't. 61, if Christianity is true, why are there so many Christians whose lives look no different than those of non-believers? In parentheses, aren't many Christians hypocrites. Well, yeah, many Christians are hypocrites because they're humans. And I don't care if you think you've been saved or not, that doesn't magically make you a great person. And sometimes people have convinced themselves that they're great people when they're real shitbags. But this idea of Christianity being true or untrue, even that sounds like a silly dichotomy to me. Even two groups who swear that they are Christians will disagree on some things. So clearly, if we assume that Christianity being true is the entire set of propositions in Christianity being true, then it's almost impossible for anyone, even devout believers, to believe that all of Christianity is true, because they're going to find articles of doctrine and dogma that they disagree on. 62, why are there so many denominations? And does the fact of many denominations invalidate the truth of Christianity? So why are there so many denominations? Good question, Johnny. And does the fact of many denominations invalidate the truth of Christianity? No, it does not. But it definitely sullies the idea that the Bible is this univocal, clear direction that is all Christians should need in order to understand their faith. If that were the case, then there would be one or two denominations. And even then, over time, those denominations should come back together again as they get divine inspiration about what the real answers are to their problems. But since they're not getting any real answers, it just splinters endlessly, because there is no central authority coming down and saying, no, this is the way it was supposed to be, or this is what I meant to write in the book, and maybe I wasn't clear. No, God has, whether you want to believe it or not, God has essentially gone quiet, assuming you ever believe that God talked to anyone in the first place. Because if God were actively driving things forward, these things would, yes, splinter from time to time, but then they would consolidate again when the word of God became clearer. And we are not getting that, whether you want to believe that God speaks or not. This simply is not happening. 63, is Christianity responsible for millions of deaths throughout history? Why or why not? Yeah, it absolutely is responsible. And what implications does the answer have for the evaluation of Christian truth claims? Well, that's obviously pretty complex. I mean, on one hand, Christianity has been comprised of billions of people throughout time, and any organization that's made of billions of people will at times make horrific decisions, even up to and including those that kill many other people. I'm not saying that as an apologist to make light of anything, and I'm not saying that that excuses anything. I'm just being realistic about it. That being said, the fact that the book itself endorses genocide and many other nasty practices like slavery doesn't help anything at all. So that is a very sticky thing that any parent should have a hard time talking about with their kids. But as to the end of this question where it says, what implications does the answer have for the evaluation of Christian truth claims? I mean, ultimately, that makes no impact whatsoever on, for example, did Christ resurrect? Was he resurrected? I mean, even if Christians have gone out and murdered 1 billion people, and honestly, over time, maybe they have, but even if that is the case, that would not say anything positive or negative about whether Christ resurrected. Those are two entirely separate questions. 64, what happens to people who have never heard the gospel? They go to hell. Yeah, Johnny, they go to hell. I know Christians don't want to hear that, but if you read it carefully, they go to hell. 65, why don't miracles happen as frequently today as they did in the Bible? Well, because in the Bible, you had a bunch of old Hebrew men who wanted to write down things that sounded good for their audience and would proselytize for this idea of their God. But there was not at any time in Hebrew/Israelite history a time when they were walking around and miracles were just happening all around them. It's like, oh, what do you know? Another miracle happened today. No, despite what you might read in the books, because guess what? Old men wrote that who wanted to promote their religion. So there we have it. That's 65 questions. Whew, we got through a lot of them, didn't we? I tried to go as fast as possible. Obviously, I was very high level on these because some of these could be entire videos, and this video could have been a 5-hour video, which I don't want to make and you guys don't want to watch. But I thought it'd be fun to go through these in rapid style and hear the questions that apologists are saying they should talk to their kids about. And I don't disagree. A lot of these you should talk to your kids about. A lot of these maybe you should think about deeply yourself, because some of them don't speak so well to what it is that you're worshiping. Thank you for joining me here on another episode of Cynical Sermons. I am your boy, Adam Amnola. If I've given any answers today, even one answer that is in any way incorrect or against Christian doctrine or theology in any way, Yahweh or Jebus or the Holy Spirit, does anyone want to correct me on any of this? Anything? There you go. I guess I nailed it. So like, subscribe, do all the things. I hope to see you on future videos. I appreciate you being here with me. This has been helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for you. And until I see you again, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.